This is Dr. David Proden, and I want to thank you as we begin another journey into school and community safety. If you're looking for industrial safety expert, Appalachian State University professor Dr. Timothy Ludwig, please visit www.safety-doc.com. Again, that's Dr. Timothy Ludwig at www.safety-doc.com.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Proden. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Proden on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hi, everybody. This is David, and welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast on a very snowy day here in southern Wisconsin. And we have two more snow events in the 7-day forecast. It has been unreal. More snow than my snowblower can handle. We need spring. So I went to the doctor last week for a routine checkup, and my doctor came in and excitedly shared, David, you've lost 7 pounds. Your blood pressure is lower. Your cholesterol is better. What have you been doing? And I said, not really anything different at all. It's just luck at this point. I was in a car accident a month ago, so that actually kind of shut down the evening running. So I was surprised to get that report and just had to say, it is what it is, but maybe even better health on the future. Safety Doc's pretty healthy. But let's talk about the neighbor boys. When I was a kid, we built snow forts out in the yard. The neighbor boys tend to build them at the end of their driveways, so they take advantage of the big snowbanks pushed up by the city plows. Now, of course, the problem with that is very dangerous to have a snow fort at the end where if a plow came through, it could hit the fort, a car, and if kids came out of it, things like that, could be hit by a car. So very dangerous. So I told them, I said, the fort itself is very cool. You've done a good job on this, but this is too dangerous. You've got to go back. You've got a lot of property here and just not build near the road. So I said, I'm actually going to take a shovel and disassemble this fort so no one gets an idea to play in this because this is too dangerous. Thought that was fine. Thought the kids understood. So I got, yeah, okay. So I went, disassembled the fort, and left for work the next day. They had rebuilt the fort twice as big and I think twice as strong. So I did go and talk to the parents who then talked to the boys, but the fort remains. Definitely those kinds of things in winter can be obviously dangerous. We have to be aware of when kids are building these snow forts, you don't get close to the road. But then again, my mom tells stories of when growing up in the 1940s, they would block off Main Street in the small town I grew up in. And kids would be at the top of the hill with those sleds that had the rails at the bottom on snowy days. And people from the community would stand at the crossroads and they would wave the kids down. So they would go down this 1/4-mile hill. And you had to make sure you stopped before you got to the bridge or you went down into the river. That would be bad. But so I guess it all kind of depends upon which lens you're using to look at these things. So today I wanted to talk about the Uncanny Valley. Now that's a term that you can Google, Uncanny Valley. It actually gets into if you're watching, let's say, The Matrix or The Incredibles or Wreck-It Ralph or the movie Avatar. And it's when things that are computer generated, CGI generated, begin to look too close to human that people have this adverse reaction to it. They don't respond well. For example, the movie The Polar Express, which came out in 2004, actually one of my favorite movies. I always could watch The Polar Express, but there were a lot of people and a lot of children that reacted negatively to the movie because the characters were made to be lifelike, but didn't quite have that lifelike appearance. So they were approaching this genuine lifelike state, but weren't there. And that was very unsettling for children to watch and even some adults to watch. Where if you look at movies like The Incredibles, they purposely go with animated figures which are cartoonish in appearance. So there isn't this challenge to your mind of, is this a person? Is this a computer generated graphic that is supposed to be convincing me that this is an authentic person, or is this obviously animated? So for years, of course, when I grew up, we had cartoons, Bugs Bunny, the Roadrunner, stuff like that. Well, like they're animated, so you don't have any issue with this Uncanny Valley. But so this is becoming more and more prevalent. I go back to the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, and as you watch the scenes of the robots walking around with humans, the robots definitely are robots. That they do not look. I mean, they have a human type body, but they're white, and they have a plastic and definitely a latex or rubber face to it. And there is a very distinguishing element where nobody would confuse a robot visually with being a human. So, that's one example of where this whole Uncanny Valley. So that would be in the Uncanny Valley, which was coined, let's go to this, by Masahiro Mori in 1970. So was working in robotics at that time and came up with the term Uncanny Valley. Again, saying, we can get to a point where people will accept not only avatars, but robots if they definitely do not look human-like. It's when they get too human-like that people start to feel really nervous and uncomfortable. And I'm bringing this up because we're at that point right now where some of these avatars, some of these computer-generated graphics are looking so human-like, and then the algorithms behind them and kind of the puppeteers, the people operating these, are able to have them comment on contemporary issues, for example, in society, and have superimposed so it looks like they're wearing logoed athletic wear or things like that. So it is pretty amazing that actually they can be a tool for marketing. So you could contract with a company and they could be wearing all of their clothing line, for example, or jewelry line, or using their products and technology and commenting about it. And again, this is just an avatar. Let me give an example. This is from thecut.com. I'll link this out. Thecut.com talks about little Michaela. So if you do a Google search, ILIL, and then Michaela, MIQUUELA, little Michaela. So you might want to check that out because, so it's Michaela Sosa, little Michaela, has over 1 million followers on Instagram, over 1 million followers. And she was recently, this account was hacked by a troll, so making her say things from a certain political position. I think that also indicates the risk of this. She was having discussions back and forth with another avatar, so giving this impression, that there was this kind of lifelike feud going on. But so I've taken a look at these images, and they are all, obviously, they're all appropriate images. It's just like if it was somebody, vacationing and they're taking pictures at different places, like I'm here, or these are some of the styles I'm into now, or here's some of the bands I'm into, or whatever. So I'm following this through the article, and they're showing links. So in these selfies, I'm reading this from thecut.com. In selfies, you can see the freckles on Michaela's face, her gap tooth smile, but up close, her brown hair, often pulled into Princess Leia-esque buns, looks airbrushed, Twitter users have noted that her flyaway frizz always falls in the same pattern. Her skin reads as smooth as the glass screen that separates us. And when you peer into Michaela's big brown eyes, she fails the ultimate test of humanity. No, Michaela isn't real, at least not like you and me. She's an avatar puppeteered by Brud, B-U-R-D, a mysterious LA-based startup of engineers, storytellers, and dreamers who claim to specialize in artificial intelligence and robotics. So let's think about that. So imagine 1 million followers. And so this little Michaela, I would put somewhere in the mid-teens as an age, maybe late teens, 15 to 17 range. So you could have high school students, middle school students who think, this is cool, like I'm following this person. And they're going places, doing things that I would want to do. They're pretty mainstream. And as I, again, looked at these images, I wasn't completely convinced that these weren't authentic, unless I guess I would have really studied them. The CGI graphics, and they've gotten so good. And because what she is posting, there is, again, this research team kind of behind this of engineers, storytellers, and dreamers who are posting things similar to what an authentic human would post. And they can stay very contemporary. Imagine they can identify what's happening in her area easily through gathering news sources, weather, things like that. So if they place her on a vacation in Italy, or if they place her in Los Angeles, they can quickly find out what's happening in the area, and she can be commenting on that as if she was authentic. So it's like, well, okay, how could this keep going? I mean, wouldn't people eventually say, like, she was supposed to show up at this event and she wasn't there, or she commented and no one has any record of her being at this event? And but really, out of Facebook fans, I was reading this, or Facebook friends. I do not have a Facebook account, but most people don't know the majority, or have never met the majority of the people that they have as Facebook friends. So if you have 1,000 friends on Facebook, there are at least 500 of those on average, probably, some people, many more, that you have never physically met, or that you've never had a conversation with on the phone or anything like that. And probably most of these people, outside of just some comments back and forth on Facebook, like you haven't done anything like a Skype or a Messenger or a chat or anything like that. So it's not that much of a stretch to believe that, like, a little Michaela, and now there are other CGI avatars which are kind of crossing this uncanny bridge. They're starting to cross it to the other side where people aren't sure, or they've just accept it because this person is also, this avatar is also sharing information which is contemporarily accurate to what's happening, and then also contextually and situationally accurate. The people just go with it, because how often do any of us, and especially kids, validate and authenticate their sources? They don't. So, and we also have all of the apps now on our phone. Like, I know on my phone, which I got this summer, you can take a picture of yourself and it converts it to an avatar. Now, of course, it's pretty silly and goofy, but the technology is easily available for you to create avatars of yourself, or to have somebody do that through Fiverr, for example, for maybe $20, which could look pretty close. It's not going to be to the quality of where these engineers are at, but also somebody might be looking at this little Michaela account and think, well, that's an authentic person. That is her, this Michaela Sosa, but she's also adding this filter when she posts to give herself a little bit of a CGI-y look. So she's almost, doing this on purpose just to obscure, so she's not as recognizable in public. So people think things like this.
Thank you for tuning in to the Safety Doc Podcast with the nation's leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Author, radio show host, university instructor, researcher, expert witness, and consultant. Powerful testimonials. Dr. Perodin has a strong reputation as the go-to safety consultant, and he was still able to exceed our expectations. When we went looking for an expert in the field of crisis preparedness and prevention, David was the single person we pursued. Not easy stepping into the touchier subjects of life, but Dr. David pulls it off. Take a listen. Now, back to Dr. David Perodin and the Safety Doc Podcast.
Look, Kevy, the best I can do is 2D batteries, a picture of Anne Hathaway, and a bus token. You take that, and you just walk away. Huh? An ashtray, a bar of soap, and a sprinkler head. You take that, and you just walk away.
So let's contemplate the implications of this. So I had a discussion with one of my friends about this whole concept of transhumanism. So this is kind of along that stretch somewhat. So he's studying transhumanism, which is saying at some point, and right now it's kind of philosophical, but we could use technology to transform the human condition to create, for example, a greater intelligence, a greater sensory, input, that we could see things better, that we could smell things better. We could have our strength increased by certain types of, either physiological changes to our body or certain types of apparel we wear. I know this is common now in manufacturing, where people can kind of wear suits which help them lift things. And then they don't fatigue nearly as quickly as what they did without these suits. And they're not real bulky or anything like that. And that will just become kind of more common in time. But his discussion, which is very interesting, and I'd like to have this discussion on a Safety Doc podcast with him, is what would be the impacts of transhumanism if all of us could be walking around. And I believe T.J. Martinell in his book, The Stringers, so you could check that out. He is a fiction writer, kind of bases stuff in the gritty 1930s, really fascinating stuff. But in The Stringers, I think talks about, what if we have a society that evolves where you could have something like a bionic eye, or, now they talk about the contact lenses that can take pictures, can record video. And pretty soon all of that is just going to be ubiquitous. It'll be like the phones are today. I would have never thought when I was in high school that we would have, cell phones that would be similar to what we have today. I think I had one or two friends who had cell phones that were literally like the bricks. One actually had one in the car, and that was pretty wild. But where you have this entire recording studio, this entire research device at your tips. More calculation and access than we could have ever imagined, in high definition and so forth. But imagine, like, if you're just walking around, that you could be looking, observing something and recording it, and recording conversations with other people. And now everything is kind of this universally invasive. And what does that look like in areas where there obviously shouldn't be the ability to record? Is there this whole counter industry that develops to block this technology? Like in locker rooms at the gym and things like this. But just in general, everybody would have to be very measured with their words and their actions, because you would have this ongoing record of kind of what you said and what you did. It gets in, I guess, a little bit to that discussion I had in an earlier podcast about how China is giving everybody the social score right now. So the higher social score you have, the more perks you have, such as being able to fly on a plane, being able to take a faster train, and things like that. And if you don't keep your social score up, then you lose those privileges and you have to do things to earn those privileges back. So this kind of gets into that weird area and this whole transhumanism of what does it look like even for if you're out for a hike in the woods or if you're in some kind of sports, if you're, even golfing and stuff like that, and suddenly, through your eyes and special, contact lenses that identifies how far everything is, what your shot should be, and maybe something you wear, how far your arm should go back, your shoulders before you hit the ball and accelerate. And I mean, how much of this then takes away from the game? And as we watch all of the athletics, if we start to have athletes who are using, special types of transhumanism advancements to which we already, I guess, see, right, in steroids and things like that. This would be much further down the road than that, as far as changing the ability to race to a line drive and all of those things, and keep your balance and jump when you're at the outfield fence. Imagine someone jumping 10 feet in the air to catch a ball. Some sports like basketball, you'd have to get prohibitive because, that could be so manipulated. If everybody could be able to, jump 15 feet and dunk a ball. So we run into this whole area. So right now, this uncanny valley, let's go back to that. We've all had movies we've seen or these images of robots on TV that they like to show off now, where they'll have the face be hyper realistic and it'll be programmed to do a basic conversation with somebody. So it does look like it's an authentic conversation, although, there's obviously one or more people on the other end programming what the response is. But then what they do on purpose is they leave the back of it exposed. So you do see all of the mechanical pieces and the wires and things like that. So it's just this really weird observation. But so you see this hyper realistic kind of this uncanny effect from the ears forward, and from the ears back, you completely know that this is a robot. So, but this ability for, I'm going to really focus now on kids. I think it's going to be very difficult for kids to identify these little Michaelas and the CGI avatars which are crossing the uncanny valley. And I don't think they're going to scrutinize, and the gut reaction also of saying this seems weird. I just don't think that that's going to be there. So we come back to Masahiro Mori in 1970, coining this term, uncanny valley. It describes our strange revulsion toward things that appear nearly human, but not quite right. So again, it's that sense of not quite right. It's all situational awareness. I talk about this in my book, School of Heirs, which will be out soon, teaching situational awareness. For example, if you have students, let's say that you take 10 students and you take 15 minutes and you walk around the school and you walk around the outside of the school, and you have intentionally created some situations which are out of the ordinary. For example, maybe you have the song Jingle Bells playing over by a swing set. Maybe you have some cryptic ancient alien type chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Maybe there is a stuffed unicorn that's hanging from a flagpole and a cutout of Justin Bieber that is like inside of a car that you walk by. It's so just things like that. And you walk through, and maybe in one area, you have this really strong scent of like oranges or something like that. So you go through, and you don't tell the students ahead of time to observe or anything like that. You just say we're going to take some time out of the classroom. We're going to walk today, get some movement, and then you come back and you sit down and say, you know what, I thought there were some things a little different today than usual, and I'm not going to say anything, but did anybody here notice anything out of the ordinary today? And the first few times you do that, the students might identify one thing, two things, especially if somebody points it out. Oh, yeah, that's Justin Bieber in the car. Okay, yeah, we got that. But how about the jingle bells that was over by the slide? Or how about like the chalk drawings or whatever, or some of these things? They're not going to identify that because they're not looking for it. They're not actively in this brain mode of situational awareness. Again, situational awareness, as I'm kind of trying to weave this all together, also gets into this uncanny divide. It is what helps you identify when something just quite isn't right, whether it be like this little Michaela or whether it be like something that your friend is posting. This is very helpful with grooming or sexual offenders. It's usually the child's peers that identify something isn't quite right with whoever, their friend. They're kind of hiding their phone. They're not interacting as much with us. And just there's some sense, like when we bring up whoever this person is that they're interacting with, and they can pick up on that. And then they need to be able, again, to act on that and be educated to, if you have that sense, bring it forward into a report, into telling an adult. But so this is amazing stuff, this uncanny valley, because this really wasn't so much a concern until recent, because everything was so overtly pointed out, like Godzilla and stuff like that in the movies. I mean, it was obviously, not real, and aliens and just these. I think a Young Frankenstein and things like that, kind of the movies that I liked. But so the uncanny valley, again, gets into this revulsion where you actually, they show it. So it looks like a valley. It dips down, people's acceptance of this cartoon figure. So again, the movie The Incredibles, people very accepting. Because the Incredibles are designed to be very kind of angular and obviously not real looking. But then again, you get toward Polar Express and you have this deep dip down. It goes below a baseline where some people feel revolved. Something's not right. Something is just weird with the movements of the speech and the hair and where the eyes are. And it looks like there isn't any emotion in back of the eyes. We're all very adept at identifying that because for years, before we had focus lock with the screens on our phones, for years, we could identify subtle changes in people by the way that they were looking with their eyes, by facial expressions, by body expressions. We could also do this with animals in our environment. 200 years ago, if you cross a wild animal in the woods, understanding its positioning and things like that, we're very tuned into this. Skills that we have actually quickly lost. We've quickly lost these skills. It's like you have this time to develop them, and what's happening is we're not developing them. We're again going to the screen. We're going to the focus lock, and we haven't been helped out because schools do not teach situational awareness to kids. Like that little trip I was talking to you about. That goes right from the scouting handbook. Sir Baden-Powell had many activities like that for scouting where they would focus on situational awareness. So just kind of check that out too. Sir Baden-Powell, Badenpowell. Talk about that in my book, School of Airs. But that was 100 years ago. I think it was more than, I think it was like 110 years ago, the first version of that came out. And some of those activities are used today by snipers to teach situational awareness. And situational awareness is, for example, peering through a scope, looking at a couple acres of prairie and being able to identify someone who has hidden out there, or even like, a pen that is put up and just sticking a little bit above the grass, somewhere that they can identify that they're so used to what is ordinary that they can pick up very quickly what is out of the ordinary. So that's that whole uncanny valley of crossing, also picking up what is quite what shouldn't be there, what is just a little bit off, like somebody who's hiding, who's all done in camouflage, but there's a little bit of a pattern there that just doesn't quite match what is around that person. So that's how they're identified. So, again, let's make this clear. This uncanny valley is something that is innate and deep within us. So it's just kind of been elicited recently through the CGI avatars. So we hear more about it, from 1970 onward, and we're hearing more about it right now as CGI is rapidly advancing. And we have these things like little Michaela, who is also, sporting apparel that she basically is, she's not being paid to do this. The people behind the scenes are receiving some type of payment, okay, have her wear this shirt with whatever logo or these type of shoes, and support these types of things. So it is this weird area too, where if you're an actor, now several actors also have CGI counterparts in final productions of movies. So they do stuff in front of a green screen, and suddenly it's like Dobby, right? In Harry Potter, Dobby, who obviously wasn't human, but did seem very realistic for, as he presented on screen, of having human-like qualities. But so Dobby was, I think, about 3 foot tall, and if you were to just look Dobby up, had very exaggerated features. But Dobby also kind of crossed this uncanny valley where, when he started to struggle in the movie and eventually died, people in theaters cried when Dobby died, fully knowing that there was no real Dobby. There is not a Dobby in real life. It's not like an uncanny, animal or human that would die in a movie. It's like, this Dobby is obviously a manufactured character, but had elicited this emotion from the audience and from the members, where when he died, they felt sorrow. And again, examples of crossing this uncanny divide. So what does this all mean? So we've already talked about some of the points, but this will change, I believe, the future of what we know as fame. I think you're going to have famous avatars, and they will be at the same level as people who actually, right now go on concert and are famous athletes and just people that we would think are famous. That this is going to be this new generation of fame, and you'll never probably know who's behind this, because I think the moment you know who the puppeteer is or who the team is behind it, it takes away that appeal of the person, of the CGI avatar. It takes away that appeal. So it's best if it's just obscure in the background. It's the avatar's the focus. You're going to have famous avatars, and they can come out with anything. They can be singing songs. They can be giving speeches on certain topics. They can be used for positive motivation. If you could have apps where the avatar could start to personalize things to you or towards you. For example, they could know what is happening in your area for, weather, and for events. They could also have some algorithm scripts, where if you're sharing certain things, like if they had some questions that they were asking, that they had certain responses, again, either affirming or maybe not affirming, it's hard to say. And that's where we get into this Turing test, Turing test, the Turing test, which was the test to separate if something was authentic, if you're talking to a human, or if you were exchanging communication with a robot. That the Turing test would be able to identify, yes, this is a robot. And that is getting blurred with the little Michaelas of the world and how these processes are happening. Now, the thing with the Turing test is identifying that the robot is genuinely a robot making its own responses to you without anyone behind programming it. So we're not to that level yet. Like with this little Michaela, for example, there is this team behind it. So it's not like a true Turing test. but it's kind of like a pseudo Turing test. And again, people are following these avatars, and they are believing that these avatars are authentic. They've just given into that. And we haven't done a good job as the news, right? Because, the whole term of fake news, what is fake news? What is coming out? And people trying to validate the news. It's like, oh my goodness, how do we do this? How do we validate the news? And it's such a challenge right now on how to do this. And I don't have an answer. And we don't teach kids really well on how to do this either, on how to validate things. We don't really do this for adults either. A story comes out and somebody just takes it and goes with it. And once somebody else shares it or picks up on it, it kind of becomes authenticated, and there it is without really doing a research into it. So the other parts are, this is going to change branding. So people are going to want their hip, cool avatars out there because they're going to want to put on, shirts that have a specific brand on. So, but you're going to have branding will be completely different because it can change in the moment. And again, it's going to be, well, I want to wear what this person is wearing. I want to go to these types of events, or this person is validating maybe a purchase that I made. So what if I go online and I'm purchasing a certain brand of hiking shoes? And now the company I bought these from also then post an ad with one of these cool, popular followed avatars. And the person is wearing the identical same shoes that I just bought. I'm like, oh my goodness. Or what if I'm just shopping online at a site and I'm checking out some hiking shoes or hiking equipment, and suddenly up on a little, side pop-up or whatever, there is this popular avatar, and this person is wearing and using these types of things that I was considering buying. Well, wouldn't that influence you? Wouldn't you be like, well, I was looking at this and wow, here's what it actually looks like in use, and this, avatar, which I'm not sure I know is an avatar or I'm thinking is an authentic person. They're using it, so it's validating, and I think it would increase purchases. You also have the social justice aspect of this. You could have this person advocating for different social justice positions and build up that following. Now imagine with the elections coming up, so little Michaela has a following of 1 million subscribers. But even if it's a local election, a statewide election, and you start to have these avatars playing into that, or a national election, they're going to influence it. We know that there's been bot influence on elections, how how information has been steered. But now if you have this personal connection of somebody saying, I am for this position which aligns with this candidate. So you could definitely have, whether it be social justice or also a position that might be social exclusive, could be advocated by an avatar. And I think whoever's behind the scenes in this would want to, they would probably be paid by, whatever fund is advocating that they want this person in this office versus this person. So we can get into some really murky areas here where you can be told, given a speech, told some information from the CGI avatar that you relate to, is maybe wearing clothes from your area, or says, they're doing things from your area, and they understand, they relate to you. And it's really not a person at all. It's this group of people mixed with an algorithm of what keywords tend to get people to make certain decisions, and what type of apparel makes people feel more at ease. And all of this can be manufactured, and kind of the wool pulled over your eyes. Again, we're not teaching people to kind of think on their own. People are going to default to efficiency, and efficiency might be, well, this person looks like they've done the work. It's like they actually seem like they have done the work. That's a CGI avatar. But again, they look like they've studied this. What if you have a little Michaela who says, I study all of these types of apparel, for example, and I've compared this, and this is better. It'd be like, that person has done the work for me. And yet it's the CGI avatars communicating that. The position is, there might not have been any research any comparison done on this. It's just marketing from the backside. So students with perceptual skill limitations will be more susceptible to influence by CGI avatars. For example, students with autism, students with intellectual disabilities are not going to recognize this. These avatars, these little Michaelas, as not being authentic. It was on September 11, 2001, I was teaching when I learned of the attack on the Twin Towers. Actually, it was a fourth grade student came into my room. His name was Harley. And he said, Mr. P, did you see what's happening on the computer on the news? And I said, no. So I logged in, went to Yahoo, and they had the breaking news of the attack on the World Trade Center. And then, of course, all of the additional attacks as the information was available. And there, at that time, was a girl at the high school who had a traumatic brain injury a number of years ago, was in a farming accident, and had a traumatic brain injury that impacted her short-term memory. So what was happening is she was unable to identify if something had happened 10 minutes ago and it happened right now, that it also happened 10 minutes ago. And one of the problems she was encountering, and this was the early days of the internet when everything was pop-ups before pop-up blockers, is as she would use the computer and something would come up saying, hey, you just won whatever, back in 2001, she would click on it, believing it was authentic. She couldn't separate that out. And people were working with her on that. And she was a great kid, but this was a disability that she had where, due to the traumatic brain injury. So every time on one of the monitors at this high school, there was a replay of the plane flying into the Twin Towers. She thought it was original, that was the first time that had happened. So, of course, they needed to remove her from seeing that because she was being traumatized over and over and over and over again, in addition to, everybody else having to process through that and talk through that. So for her, she's going to easily be manipulated by a CGI avatar, especially if that avatar is trying to market a product or trying to get her to give some credit card number or PayPal or whatever it is that they're trying to get. So again, the positive sides of the avatars, could be for entertainment, could be realism if it's gaming and things like that, and people know that. But I think it gets spooky also to have avatars who are giving you. We talked at one point too about these virtual field trips. I write about this in my book. We're getting to this trend right now where people are marketing virtual field trips to school. Don't go to Washington, D.C. It's dangerous. That's told by the parents. We're not going to send our 8th grade kids there. Parents are saying this, a school district outside of Cleveland, because it's dangerous. We need to keep them safe. So instead, we'll do like a virtual field trip. Well, companies are latching onto this. They're realizing we can do virtual field trips and we can market it to schools as safety, when in fact, you can market it most effectively not as safety, but as economical. That would make more sense instead of saying, the cost to get a bus and if we have to stay there and food and all of this and the logistics. But no, they're saying this is a safety thing. So, you can have these CGI avatars, which are giving this positionality of saying, here's what it's like to be at the Lincoln Memorial and here, at the mall and Monument Mall and all of that. And again, this is the positionality of maybe like one person who's giving this, instead of people actually being out there and getting to just understand the landscape of how big all of this is. And the awe in the people who have been there before, and to look around to see the buildings, to see other people. The authentic experience is being replaced. And that's going to be ushered in further by these CGI avatars. Imagine, too, if you're given a tour, and it's not by like a teacher, but it's by like a little Michaela. So if you're like an 8th grader, and somebody your age or a couple of years older is giving this tour, who is a CGI avatar, who has positionality programmed in because they're going to, whoever's programming in, like what they want you to know about Washington, D.C. or whatever location, without ever leaving your desk, putting on your, 3D headset. But you're going to relate to that person a little better than, your teacher who might have is 30 years older than you, and it's like, what do you have in common in me versus like this person who's like looks like me and wearing the same type of clothing and listening to the same music and has some has some earbuds around her neck and things like that. So I'm going to listen to this person, right? So we go back to that high school with this student with a traumatic brain injury. She would definitely be susceptible to CGI avatar. She's not going to recognize that uncanny valley. And there are many students like that, students with autism, students with intellectual disabilities. Well over 10 million students in the United States with some sort of disability. The number is probably much higher than that. If we look at students identified under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, the number becomes more precise into that 10 million range. But if we consider students who are identified just medically, and not through schools or students, again, that might be homeschool or private school that have different disabilities that aren't showing up in these aggregate systems, the number is probably closer, to 15 million. So, we also can extend that out to adults, young adults, older adults that start to experience dementia, post-stroke, post-ischemic attack. That have a hard time identifying what's truth and what's not. We hear about these stories too, where somebody calls a grandparent and they say, yeah, I'm your grandson and I'm whatever. I'm down, in this area and I had an accident with the car and grandma, I need you to send me, wire me $4,800 and whatever. And I can't let, mom and dad know about this or whatever. And grandparents and, that authentically are taken advantage of by these con artists. And, we hear about that on a pretty frequent basis because the con artists can research and obtain all of this information about, this grandson and this connection. And then they're calling. It's almost like this uncanny valley somewhat, but there isn't this like, the grandparent could be like, well, why can't you do whatever? Or, they're not running them necessarily through this whole check of questions because on the other side, the grandchild is just accelerating, saying, you need to trust me. And I always thought I could go to you and now whatever. So it puts this person in this really awkward position. And again, these sad stories of someone who's given them, $4,800 because they thought their grandson had been in an accident and had called when it was just a con artist. So again, now imagine if this goes even, a step further. I mean, I don't see, I don't imagine grandparents getting on and Skyping and things like that. But, you could hypothetically even, have something confirmed through like an email or something like that's sent or through like a phone, well, I'm going to send you a picture of like me in the car. And if you had a picture of the grandson, you could create this whole additional layer to go with it. And again, it's accelerating time. People have to make a decision like right now. You put that on them, and then they just go with it. So how do we teach these perceptual skills and teach authentication? I think it needs to become part of school curriculums. It definitely for media, for one, that needs to be part of school curriculums. What is accurate from the media? One of the greatest tools out there, I think, it's not perfect, but it's, if you're buying something from somebody on eBay and they've sold 8,000 things and they have a 99.9% satisfaction, that's someone who's probably reliable to purchase from. And they need to maintain that. And also, kind of on Amazon in the reviews, I'd rather buy something based upon Amazon reviews, being able to read through several reviews. I'm going to go with that product. And if it has a pretty good rating, because, I have more information to go from there. So also, what are we going to look at here? We're going to look at concerts, which are going to start changing. We're going to have hologram concerts. So again, what if little Michaela becomes a singer and she shows up in concert, but she's a hologram? And this gets perfected to the point where she's on stage and she's performing. And what happened if, again, or somebody passes away and they're coming back and their image is being used as a hologram, and just all of these weird things. Who gets the money? Who gets the rights? What the message that they're sending? Who ultimately is responsible? for this, who's the gatekeeper for this. And then we start to see now these feuds between these CGI avatars, which are completely manipulated, but it is giving this sense of realism to position people in different camps, and because people do have feuds, people do have disagreements, so why shouldn't these CGI avatars, like little Michaela, have a disagreement with whoever on something, because it just adds realism. So people are catching on to this. There are social scientists and psychiatrists actually working with video game manufacturers. I talked about this before, kind of all fits in though, of the push notifications. So 10 years ago, the goal with video games was to have the game very engaging for people and try to get it lifelike, but very engaging for the user. Now the goal is to have that, but also a goal that you have push notifications, that you are exploiting the user in these games to come back and keep using the game, keep buying credits in the game. And actually, while they're using the game, you're also gaining market information from them. But for example, I've shared this, like, a push notification of, Timmy, you haven't been in your game with your tribe and your dragon is hungry and you really need to log in and feed your dragon. And then a couple hours later, it's like, oh, Timmy, you haven't logged in yet, and here's a picture of your dragon. And they show some dragon. It's kind of on its side and its tongue is out. And it's like, oh my goodness, not doing well. You need to take care of your dragon. But, if something is going on, you're not able to do this right now, you can redeem some coins, some tokens, or use your PayPal account. And, somebody else will take care of your dragon until you come back, for, like the next day or something. And people will do that. They'll be like, I can't get to it right now. I don't want my dragon to die. That sets me back. And I'm also working with the tribe. And if I don't have the dragon as an asset, that's a bad thing. So I am going to redeem like the $2 and someone will take care of my dragon, which is nothing. It just means it's cashed in your electronic dragon, which doesn't exist, is fine for another 24 hours. So school safety implications as we wrap this up. Authentication, big. Teaching situational awareness, big. This all comes into play. Situational awareness. I talked about Sir Baden-Powell and the scouting games. These are things that we should be teaching kids, not only as part of curriculum, but students with disabilities include this in their individualized education plans or IEPs. Sexual predators, grooming, sexual offenders, all in that same category. Grooming is going to take on a whole different appearance once these CGI avatars get more perfected and cross the uncanny valley. Now it's not just the groomers sending out the 200 profiles of maybe the image that they've just copied somewhere off of a web search, or that they've just taken while out in public, and here it is. And it could be like your daughter, your brother, your relative, whatever, and they have no idea, and it's using this image. So they have all of these different images, so it's authentic to that effect, but they don't have like multiple images of this person. So they don't have an image of them while they're going to school. They don't have an image of them while they're going out to eat. There's one image that they use. If you had a CGI avatar type system and you could cross this uncanny valley, you could start to morph this image as a groomer into several green screen type background type things you could put in front of, and you could actually say, if you identified there was someone who you communicated with, a profile online or whatever, and it could be we were at the same concert, and because I saw this in your profile image, you were at this concert and I was at the same concert. And then you could actually go in and find some pictures from that concert, or just pictures even like in a hallway where it looks like you're kind of in a big venue, and you could take the CGI, put that person in these images, put concert apparel on them, logos, other things, and start to build this where suddenly it's like, oh, you have this whole context and situation around this person, which helps to cross this uncanny valley. Groomers were already very effective with just the chatting back and forth, telling the youth what they wanted to hear, not what they needed to hear. That's what parents share, what they needed to hear. Hector Solis, an Awareness podcast, phenomenal research I would say as a citizen journalist in his series on predator behavior as a public resource, again, Hector Solis, but talking about how it is the groomer will share information and invalidate. Like, yeah, you had every right to go to that concert, even if your parent was giving you a hard time of why are you spending your money that way versus, you should be saving your money for whatever. No, you live once and you need to be able to enjoy concerts. And if you wanted this, you should go to that. That's what this person wants to hear. See, it's what they want to hear versus what they need to hear. Maybe it's like, well, you've gone to other things and whatever, but you also have some expenses. If you're going to, be paying part of your cell phone plan, then yes, you need to be paying part of your cell phone plan, and that money is not going toward the concert. What they need to hear versus what they want to hear. Now imagine, again, this is all done through chat, very effective with the groomers, unfortunately, very sadly, but very effective. And now if you can add in the CGI type avatar, and this is, and as soon as you know where this other person, the student, lives, like if they share, I live in this town or I live in whatever, you can start finding information about that, algorithms, and you can even know, again, about the weather that day. Say, and hey, it was like, I saw like you had the snowstorm or whatever. And like, I was kind of in an area once, and when I used to live, whatever, you make this whole backstory up, we had snowstorms too. And so did you have off of school today? And, yeah, I had off of school. So you have all of these things that quickly get you over this uncanny divide, this uncanny valley. But it's going to be something we want to do as schools. I talk about when I teach students who are going to be superintendents or special education pupil services directors, there's two things that in the way that we approach professional development in schools. One is awareness, and one is what is a pervasive issue. Awareness, for example, is the laundry pod challenge. So when the kids were seeing how many laundry pods they could consume, that's something that is going to be around for a couple of months, and then they'll be on to something else, which I think right now is you start your car and you have it kind of idling, or you put it in drive so it starts to move, and then you jump out next to it and you do some dance, and then you jump back into it, which is completely stupid and dangerous and all of that. But that's kind of like the new thing I've seen, and that will stop, and that will then move on to something else. But so those are awareness things. You make people aware of here's what's happening. Kids aware of that, of consequences, and parents. But that's not a fad. That's a fad, like the laundry pod. That's not happening to the level nearly that it was happening a year ago. That's going to go away. But this grooming, that's pervasive. That's something that we need to include in our curriculum of what we're teaching students about sexual offenders, about predators, about groomers. And now also this whole landscape has changed where it's going to include this whole CGI avatar type perspective. And again, what is so frightening about this is we've crossed the uncanny valley in some instances. We will defeat the Turing test, Turing, in some instances. So students aren't being taught really to validate their sources. And it's getting easier to get over that uncanny valley, and the technology is going to start moving us over that. So you could actually have a friend who you could be Skyping with who is completely CGI avatar generated. That could be me right now. It's not. I've actually got features on the side. They all come up definitely as what avatars would, but you could have that. That could actually be happening right now, that technology. I'm sure it is happening to some extent, but it could be to the quality of what this is. Like not high definition, but as long as the conversations were short and there was somebody behind the scenes, and you can have all of the movements of the mouth that can mirror for all of the words that can be programmed in. There's already software out there. It's not commercially available, but there is software which you can take anybody and make it appear as if they're giving any presentation, any speech. You can change their lip movements and all of that. So I could give the Gettysburg Address.
This has been the Safety Doc Podcast. with author, radio show host, and leading safety expert, Dr. David Perrodin. Remember to check back each week for the latest, best, and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. You can find Dr. Perrodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.